everyone, and welcome to this Food Friend interview where we are going to be talking about PR and how to use PR to create a brand that people can't stop talking about. Today, we have a Food Friend guest who is going to be taking you through an exclusive training about how you can use PR to help you grow your business no matter what stage you're at today. So I want to introduce you to Shauna Knuckles from Commotion Media Group. Shauna, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Shauna really is a dear food friend of mine because not only do we connect on life, but we connect on business as well. And we connect on how we can help emerging food and beverage brands become the next brands that everyone knows and everyone loves. I am going to hand it over to Shauna, and she's going to take you through some great training about how to make sure that you have a food or beverage brand that people can't stop talking about.
Yes, I again am so excited to be here. Thank you, Ainsley, for having me. I cannot wait to talk to you and all of your amazing food brands all about the power of PR. So I do have a presentation for us that we'll go through to chat about how you can use PR to create a food brand that people just cannot stop talking about. I'm sure that that's why we're all here, to create a brand that people just love. But here's the secret. No matter how great your shelf placement is, no matter how fantastic your sales are even, creating a brand that people want to shout from the mountaintops about doesn't just happen, but it does happen with PR. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen really quickly and pull up our presentation here. Okay, so here we have the power of PR, how to create a food brand that people cannot stop talking about. And this picture is important because what I always imagine in doing PR for food brands, no matter the size, is to create a program that really makes your customers, your community want to shout about you from the mountaintops. So a little more about me. Ainsley introduced me a bit, but to tell you a little bit more, I am Shauna Knuckles. I'm the founder of Commotion Media Group. So that is a boutique PR agency. We essentially use PR strategies to help brands become known as industry leaders. And how we do that is by creating trust, credibility, and increased awareness that all drives demand in support of your bottom line. It's all in business, it's all goes back to the bottom line, right? So a little bit about my background. Excuse me. I have served and helped brands of all sizes, all the way down to farmers market favorites with people who are just starting out selling their products in a farmers market space, all the way up to billion-dollar publicly traded beverage companies. And to be honest with you, that is what I really love about PR. It's a great equalizer for brands. Unlike some other marketing and advertising strategies and tactics, you can really get started with PR and the different elements and strategies with no monetary investment, which is crazy to say. And I know it sounds a little bit snake oily, but it's true. You can definitely do PR with just a little bit of time and creativity. So if you're starting out and you're wanting to generate some more interest and demand, PR is such a great strategy for you to use. So on to the next slide. This is just a quick outline of what we're going to be talking about today. I am going to get everybody on the same page about what PR is, why we should care, the currencies of PR, which is really, really important. These are the simple elements that go into every single PR program. Low cost strategies that are working right now, how you can make PR work for the exact current stage you are in your business, a quick checklist for success, and then I have a gift for everybody at the very end. Okay. So, what exactly is PR? The best way I think is to describe this is to compare it to a couple of other kind of complementary supporting industries, which are marketing and advertising. Um, the thing about PR is that it's often a very close to the vest industry. There's a lot of mystery around what it is and how it's done. It's very, very, very nuanced. And to be honest with you, a lot of PR professionals like it that way. It helps them have job security if it's a little bit of a secret as to how it's done. And because of that, I think to this day, my mom still doesn't even know exactly what I do. So I want to start with describing what PR is. Um, so this is how I describe PR to everyone who is just, I have absolutely no idea. And I want to set a specific scenario for you. So imagine that we're at a bar, okay? And there's Bill at the bar, and Bill wants to he's looking for a date. He really, really wants to find an amazing person that he can take out to dinner, okay? So be at this bar, Bill needs to sell himself a little bit, right? So imagine this. If you walk into the restroom at the bar, there's this huge poster that Bill has put up on the wall. I know if you've been to a bar bathroom, a restaurant bathroom, you see those posters in the bar bathroom. So just imagine there's one of Bill. And on that poster, there's a picture of him, and he says something like, "Hey, I'm Bill. I am incredibly smart. I've got a great job. I'm super fun, know all the hottest restaurants in town, and I am looking to take someone just like you out on a date." That is advertising, okay? Now, imagine you're sitting at the bar with friends. Bill walks up to you and he's like, "Hey, how you doing? My name is Bill. I am a fantastic person, really smart, very kind. I would love to take you out to dinner. What do you think?" That is marketing, okay? So Bill's telling you directly from himself what a great guy he is and trying to sell you on dinner. Now, imagine you're still sitting at the bar with your friends, and your best friend turns over to you and whispers in your ear and says something like, "Hey, do you see that guy over there? His name is Bill, and I hear he is looking for a dinner date. He is super smart, very successful, driven, great guy, super kind, loves animals, has the cutest dog in the world, and he wants to take you out on a date. Do you think you're interested?" That is PR, okay? So why I love to describe that and show you that scenario is the power of PR is that it comes from a third party trusted resource who are saying things about your brand. And the real power of that is Bill didn't pay for that, right? He built up his reputation enough to where the people around him had nice things to say about him, and they were doing it not because they were being paid, but because they were inspired to do so because of how he was showing up in his reputation. And that is free. He didn't pay for that. So I love this quote from Bill Gates where he says, "If I was down to my last dollar, I would spend it on PR," because PR, again, is so inexpensive. It does not have to cost you a ton of money. And the power of that trust is just incredible for building up your brand awareness and creating a company that people just cannot stop talking about. Okay. And again, this is how I like to describe people what PR does. It essentially, you're convincing people to say nice things about you without having to pay them to say it. So again, much more trustworthy. than some of the other advertising marketing techniques that brands can use. And we've talked a little bit about this as to why you should care. Number one, PR really creates staying power for your brand. Creating that situation where people are having conversation and dialogue, it makes your brand relevant and it drives awareness through that word of mouth promotion. We've talked about this a little bit, but it creates trust. And trust is quickly becoming one of the biggest commodities in business. Today, consumers are savvier than ever, and they really need to trust a company and trust a brand in order to part with their dollars to buy what you're offering. And lastly, it creates demand. So that intrigue through word of mouth creates demand for products because it's human nature. We want what everyone is talking about, or we at least want to know what everyone is talking about. Okay. And to really drive this home, what I like to do is talk about brands who are PR forward in their strategy and compare that to brands who are equally as successful, but have not taken such a PR forward approach to promoting their business. And what I did very specifically and intentionally here is have, again, all of these companies are incredibly successful. No one can deny that. A lot of these are household names. Sell-through of their products are amazing, but one company in the comparison has been very PR forward and the other not so much. So let's talk about SoulCycle versus Flywheel. And again, something that I did here is I only included one food brand example because I think it's important and it allows us to be a little bit objective or subjective to say and look at what other people are doing in different industries. Okay, so SoulCycle versus Flywheel. Again, both very, very successful national chains of cycling studios, but SoulCycle took a very PR forward approach to building their brand from the very, very early days. And what they did is combined the power of relationships. They really focused on creating intimate relationships with their target customer right from the beginning. When they had one studio, 20 people a day who could ride, they were very focused on having that one-to-one connection with their exact right target customer, which is a super important piece of PR. And secondly, they created an experience for people that gave them something worth talking about. So I don't know if you've been to a SoulCycle class, but you walk in and it's more normal today than it was when they got started. But you walk in, the room is dark, there are candles lit, your instructor is like half DJ, half motivational speaker. It's like, am I at a fitness class? Am I at a Tony Robbins conference? It's like this experience. And at the time, there was nothing like it. So people wanted to talk about it because they were having this great experience. Okay. So that's what SoulCycle did. They combined relationships with an experience that people wanted to talk about. So let's talk about Bonza versus Barilla. And again, both incredibly successful companies. I think Barilla has like 30% market share of the packaged pasta vertical, which is crazy, crazy, amazing success. But Bonza took a very, very PR forward approach to building their brand right from the beginning. And if you're not familiar with them, they are the chickpea pasta. They make their pasta out of chickpeas. And what they did is take their brand story, combine it with current trends to solve a problem for people, and again, give them something worth talking about. So they really use the power of story and the foresight and the insight as to what people are talking about right now, which was plant protein at the time. I know we're still talking about plant protein, but when they started, it was just kind of the tipping point for it to become mainstream. So that's how they created a brand story and a brand experience that people wanted to talk about. And lastly, let's talk about Hanes versus Spanx. So again, Hanes, very successful household name. You can buy their underwear at any city, any store in the country. But Spanx, also very successful, but they took a PR forward approach to building their brand. In the early days, I don't know if you've heard Sarah Blakely, the founder's story, but she had no money. And oftentimes brands who have no money, they have to put in sweat equity through PR to create that foundation of story and that foundation of relationships. And that's exactly what she did. So she really built her brand on the power of creating relationships with everybody. So she had relationships with every single salesperson who was building out her, she was doing that to build out her sales force. So she would go into Neiman Marcus and create intimate relationships with all of the salespeople to really get them to buy in to her brand story, which again, her brand story was really centered around solving a problem and creating a product that solved a problem that no one had ever thought about or talked about before. So she kind of combined it all. She had relationships, she had a powerful story that solved a problem, and she was about giving people an experience because they were trying a product that literally had never existed before. Okay? So next, I want to talk about the currencies of PR. And the reason why we started off with those brand examples is because it'll give you some kind of insight and examples to work with as we're talking through these three currencies. Every single PR campaign, no matter how simple or how complicated it is, are built around these three elements, these three currencies. They're our foundation for PR, no matter how new you are or how sophisticated you are in the market. This is what we always go back to. So currency number one is story. This is who you are, this is what you do, and this is why you exist. And a key part of the story and what makes the story so powerful is the communication of your values. So that comes into the what you do and why you exist. That's what attracts people to you, is the communication of your values. It's really common for people to get a little bit hung up on telling their story. Usually we go in one of two directions, like way too many details that are not relevant to your brand at all. So people get a little bit lost and confused. Or on the other end of the spectrum, people get stuck and they're not really sure what to say, how to say it, and they just kind of freeze up. But it doesn't have to be that way. So I have three really simple pieces of advice for crafting your story. And so number one, again, goes back to values. And if you haven't thought about your brand values yet, I would really recommend you take the time and write this down. But as a company, what are your values? And then next, I want you to think about the values of your customer. And then what you're going to do is identify the bridges between the two. So you've got this value here, your customer has this value here. How can you create a bridge? Doing that creates an emotional connection between you and your customer. So one example of that would be, let's say, as a healthy food brand, one of your key values is health. That's actually one of my personal values too, is health. So just as an example, let's say your Sally's Simply Delicious cookies, your gluten-free, all natural, delicious cookies, and your core value is health. And let's say your target customer are moms of young kids. So one of their core values is likely family. So the key bridge that you can make between yourself and your customer would be a statement like, we created these cookies so that moms don't have to give a second thought to what they're putting in their kids' bellies, even when it comes to cookies. Okay. So that's how you create those bridges between you and your customer. And then my second tip is to not just communicate what you do, but communicate what you can do for your customers. Talk about the problem that you solve. So going back to Bonza, they could have very easily said, we create chickpea pasta. We have the best, most delicious chickpea pasta in the world. Try it and you'll be amazed. They could say that. That's honestly not something worth talking about. So what they did instead was show up and tell their customers how they are solving a problem for them. So I don't recall if this is their tagline, but it is the phrase that made them famous. And they came out saying, we have as much protein as a steak in our pasta. And that's pretty powerful for people who are looking to cut back on meat, but still get that protein from a plant-based source. So they, as part of their core story, they showed up and told their customers the problem that they're solving and how that relates to their brand. And then lastly, is keep it simple. And I know people say this, but the reason why you want to keep this really simple, got to take a sip of coffee for that one because this is good, guys, is that you want people to be able to remember your story. And on the other side, you want people to be able to tell your story. So this is how big brands get people to talk about their company. They keep their stories really simple so that people can remember them and that they're repeatable. Okay, so next, the next currency that is so incredibly important in PR is relationships. So the core types of relationships that we focus on developing in any PR program are relationships with influential people. That can be anything from Instagram influencers to leaders of mom groups to anyone who is influencing your target customer. So as an example to help you kind of think outside of the box as to who you want to create these influential relationships with, Lululemon created the foundation of their brand in relationships with yoga instructors. So what they would do is go to all the local yoga studios. They'd give the instructors outfits a few times a year. And when their students would come in and see what they were wearing, it was the absolute best sales tool that they could do because the students really looked to their instructors as a person of influence and they wanted to wear what they were wearing. The second type of relationship is community. And this can be this is the community wherever makes sense for your brand. So it could be your local community and getting involved in making relationships where you are geographically, but it's also the community where your customers are. So like if you have a protein powder, maybe the community that you want to focus on building is like a CrossFit community. You want to become really well known in the CrossFit community, the paleo community, something like that. Or if you're a kids food brand and really focused on serving kids and parents, you probably want to figure out how to develop a community of parents, right? And then the third type of relationship that we really focus on building are like-minded businesses. And these are the other brands that have similar values to you. They reach a similar customer base. And having these different types of relationships can be really powerful to amplify each other's brands so you can reach their audience and they can reach yours. And also, if you're a smaller brand and looking to build yourself up, it's a great strategy. We call it brand jacking, where you kind of use some of their brand credibility to build up your brand as well. And the last type of relationship are media contacts. So that is editors, it's freelance reporters, it could be bloggers, broadcast TV stations, and very, very important to PR, but oftentimes people think these are the only relationships that matter in PR is getting yourself featured in the news, which is not the case. You can see how all of these other relationships can be super, super important. So I put it at the bottom for a very specific reason because it's not the only piece of PR that matters, okay? So one tip here, one of the most common questions I get is how do you create these relationships? People kind of aren't really sure how to go about having these influential relationships with the influential people, with media, with other businesses. And the one thing that I tell people to remember is this: you create these relationships just like you would create a relationship with a friend, okay? So when we're developing relationships with friends, how do we show up? You show up and you support, you show up and you provide value that you hope that they return to you. But what you don't do is come into a conversation with the hope to sell them something, because that's not how you build trust. And I know that it's a little bit counterintuitive in business because, again, I don't disagree. Everything's got to map back to the bottom line. But what's important in PR is how you make people feel, because if you make people feel like you're selling to them, they're not going to trust you. So just think about what kind of friend you want to be. And the way I always like to describe this is, do you want to be the friend that everybody turns to when they need support, that everybody just is so excited to talk about when you're doing something new? I have those friends in my life where no matter what they do, because I trust them and I know that they're amazing and awesome, I'll help them when they ask for it. On the flip side, do you want to be the friend who is what I call the MLM friend? Nothing against MLMs. I buy from them sometimes, but I know we all have those friends who are selling hair care, makeup, whatever it is. And when they reach out to you, the only reason they're texting you or emailing you is because they want to sell you something. And that's not the feeling that you want to leave your customers with, is that you're an MLM type of friend. Okay. So number 3, the third currency is experiences. And this is very specifically how you make people feel and giving people something to talk about. So we've really kind of shown a handful of examples with SoulCycle, with Lululemon, with Bonza, and how you can create an experience that people want to share with their friends. So this is a key part of developing a brand that people can't stop talking about, is you have to think about how they're experiencing your brand so that they actually have something to talk about. And this doesn't have to be complicated. This doesn't have to be expensive. Just one example, I've had clients in the past who would do something as simple as keep track of all of their best customers. Maybe it's people who are posting about their products through Instagram, and they literally just keep an Excel grid of who those people are, and they reach out and they ask when their birthday is. And they, every week, every day, however often makes sense, they go into that grid and they do something like super simple, but just really thoughtful for their birthdays. It might be, they had addresses for some people, so they would send a little something in the mail, like a gift of their product if it made sense, or a card and a gift card. But you can spend like 10, 15, 20 bucks on your top 100 customers. If you're spending 10 bucks on 100 people, I'm not great at math, but I'm pretty sure that's around $1,000, to have 100 people who literally can't stop talking about your brand because you did something nice for them for their birthday. It doesn't have to be complicated. Okay. Next, I want to share with you 3 very specific strategies that are working right now for food brands to build their businesses. So combining all of the elements that we've talked about, these are strategies that, again, don't have to cost a lot, if any, money, and you can implement these in your business right now to create a brand that people cannot stop talking about. So the first is cross-branded in-person experiences. I absolutely love getting food products into in-person experiences because it is such a simple way to sell people instantly on your product. And partnering with another brand, maybe it's a bigger brand, where you offer product for them to sample to their people at an event that they're hosting. Maybe they have a going back to the example of Soul Cycle again, let's say you're Sally's Simply Delicious Cookies and you want to create a relationship with your local Soul Cycle studio. Go in, talk to their community manager, the person at their front desk, and just ask, like, could we create a cookie bar for your clients on Sunday after they ride, and come in, set up, a little spread with coffee and your cookies, and give people like toppings. Maybe they can make like cute little cookie sandwiches or something. And that gives you the ability to align yourself with a really great brand. If you're looking to connect with people who are health conscious, health focused, that's a great opportunity for you. And then you're setting something up that people will want to talk about. It gives them an experience. So I don't know about you, but if I was walking outside of an exercise class, I'm going to want a cookie. And if there's a cookie bar set up with coffee, I'm definitely taking a picture of it, definitely posting about it on Instagram. And all that costs you is time, some product, and a little bit of creativity to have that thought to create that experience for people. But very, very powerful. And you're just getting right in front of all of the exact people who you'd want to be targeting. The second type of strategy that's working really right now is relationship building with influential people. I hear from a lot of brands, they're hesitant to be reaching out to influencers right now, but I'm here to say that influencer marketing is not going away. It's going to continue to grow and evolve. Um, the key thing that you have to remember here is going back to that intention of who you want to be as a brand and how you want to make people feel, and open your mind a little bit as to who influential people are that are really targeting your customers. What I like to do for this exercise is hopefully you have a predefined avatar for your product. And what I do is create a timeline of how that person is probably spending their entire day. So let's say that you're looking to target your Sally Simply Delicious Cookies, you're looking to target moms. Write out how she is spending her entire day, what she's doing at each different point of the day. And maybe you find out that after she drops her kids off at school, she goes to a coffee shop almost every day. So someone who's a little bit surprising that probably influences her, even if she doesn't know it, is the barista at that coffee shop. So what you could do is create a barista outreach program. I mean, who is like paying attention to baristas? No brands are really paying attention to people like that. They're not thinking about them as influencers. But you could put together like early morning care packages with cookies and a bunch of fun things that are relevant to your brand so that they know who you are, and it could be an in to getting your product placed in those coffee shops. But they're the people who are connecting with your target customer every day, and you have an opportunity to influence them just by creating that relationship. Okay? And then lastly, we've talked about this a little bit, but using story to solve a problem. Really, really think about how your brand relates to what people are talking about right now. So what are the current problems that your target customer is facing, and how can you tell your story in a way that solves that problem for them? This does take a little bit of thought, and it is what our little gift for you guys is related to. So I know that this does take some strategic thinking and some strategic thought, but it is so powerful, and having a story that solves a problem, people will remember it. And then once that problem is solved for them, they are never going to forget your story to tell it to other people. Okay, next, this is how you use PR right now to create to create success and momentum to get yourself to the next stage in business. So what I always tell people is to remember that PR is a tool. I think it's really easy for us to think about how we want to be here, even though we're right here. And when you're striving and executing strategies that make sense for this stage in business, you're kind of end up burning yourself quite often, when you're not really truthful about the current stage that you are in of business, if that makes sense. So focus on using PR as a tactic to get you to that next level versus saying, amazing, I'm going to start doing PR. I want to be on Oprah. I want to get in Mind, Body, Green. I want to be in all of these amazing national publications. But if you don't have really strong national distribution, it does not make sense for you to be targeting national media outlets. So go back to focusing on creating relationships with your right community, focusing on influential people, relationship building, developing that super strong story, and use that as a tactic to leapfrog you to that next stage where then hopefully it does make sense for you to be getting on Oprah's favorite things list. Okay. And then, the next thing I always tell people is to remember that PR is more of a brand building strategy versus quick wins. So you're going to see the most success and the most momentum if you remember that it's more of a long game versus a short game. Okay. So for example, when we work with clients, minimally they work with us for 6 months, and it wouldn't be until maybe month 3 or 4 where we start to see that momentum building up, because as we've been talking about, it takes time to build up those relationships. It takes time for your story to really set in with people. It's not instantaneous stuff. So if you start executing some of this, don't get frustrated if you're not seeing it happen right away. Consistency over the long term is where the magic really happens. And then third, focus on the right visibility. Really take the time to think about where your customers are holding their attention and who is holding their attention, and get in front of those people versus chasing some of the things that might be a little bit more flashy. I know that that can be really tempting for everybody to see an opportunity that seems really big and really exciting, but really remember that the power comes from getting in front of the right people at the right time. And then lastly here, remember to listen to the market. So this is how people create really powerful stories that convert and connect, is listening to the industry. What are people saying in your industry, and how does your brand relate? What are your customers saying, and even what is the media saying? What is the conversation? What is your place in the conversation, and how can you stand out and elevate yourself based on what people are already talking about? Okay. Next is the checklist for success in executing PR. So before we ever work with a client, before I ever recommend anybody executes PR, these are the things that you have to have in place. Otherwise, you'll find yourself putting the cart before the horse, potentially spending money or spending time before it necessarily makes sense. And we don't want to waste time. We don't want to waste money. So before you do PR, really make sure that you have all of these things in place. So number one is definitely your story. Make sure you have a solid story in place before you start doing any of these strategies. That's the baseline. You also want a final product. So if you want people to be talking about your brand, you really have to be able to deliver on giving them that final product that they can talk about. You need high resolution photos. And this is especially important if you want to do any type of media outreach, is having photos of your product that the media can share is very important. We would never execute a PR campaign for a company without having those in place. Next is the ability to sample and give away products. So, as a food brand, this is especially important to you. Make sure that you're in a place or you have the ability to plan to give product away for free. Not necessarily saying you need to be giving away thousands and thousands and thousands of product, but if you want people to talk about your brand, they need to experience your brand, and to experience it, they need to be able to try it. So you have to have a little bit of a leeway to gift and give away product for events, for sampling, um, so that people have that ability to try your product out. Next is distribution. So if people hear about your product and talk about your product, they need to be able to buy your product. So that's something to think about as well. And how you promote your business through PR is making sure that the distribution lines up. Like, again, going back to the national example, if you don't have national distribution and you get a big story in the New York Times or another big outlet, people are going to be disappointed if they can't buy your product, and that's a little bit of a wasted um, energy and time for you, as opposed to waiting until you have that distribution to match up with that national story. And then lastly is fulfillment. So you want to make sure that if that demand comes, and this is usually what happens with PR, is you reach a tipping point where you start to see some momentum, and the demand will come for people to buy your product. So if you are selling through, you need to make sure that you can fulfill on people who want to buy. Okay. And then lastly, I do have a gift for everybody. I know we talked about this a little bit. It can be a little bit daunting to tell your story, to figure out what your story is. We have something that we call the Story Starter Worksheets. It's a little bit of a Mad Lib situation where you can fill in the blank and have several prompts so that at the end you have all of that really great information drawn out of you to create your story. And that is it, everybody. That's what I have for you today.
Shauna, thank you so much for this. Not only did you help clarify what PR is for everyone, you made it really, really clear for people to start to use it right now, wherever they are. And I know that's really, really important. So thank you for debunking PR and making it really, really simple for people to start bringing this to life.
Of course.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, and hope everyone enjoyed.